Welcome, everybody. This is Steve Lashansky. You're in for a treat today, a very special treat. Thanks for being here. We want to use all our time as well as we can. Nice to see everybody. Michael, nice to see you. Larry,
Steve.
Albert, Andrew, nice to have you here. Anelli, good to have you here. Christina, nice to see you. Hey, Mike and Sean. Michael, Bruce, Andrew, I think we said hi. But anyway, let's dive right in because we've got a packed full session today. And let me start off by saying it is my great pleasure to introduce my good friend and colleague, Dan Silverberg. Dan is a thought leader, a visionary, a seasoned executive with over 45 years of experience across multiple industries. Dan brings his experience and insights from leading and growing businesses from consumer goods to consulting to technology. He's actually run companies ranging in size from $7 million to $400 million. And Dan's here to really distill some of his best principles and practices from his expertise in strategy and branding and product positioning and marketing and innovative business models and exponential top-line revenue growth. If that's not enough to get you enticed, I'll share more with you. Dan is currently launching an accelerator program for middle market companies that promises, guarantees a 5-time return on investment. How many of us could ever say something like that? More about that later today. He has much more to share with us about leadership insights. So let's dive right in, and you'll see we're all fortunate to have him with us today. Welcome, Dan. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Well, thanks, Steve. That's quite an introduction. No pressure to live up to all of that. So yeah, thanks. And it's really my pleasure to have gotten to know you and what you're doing, and have really helped me in my own thinking on leadership. So I really appreciate that.
My pleasure, Dan. I look forward to this conversation. And what we're going to do today, Dan's going to do a bit of a presentation. He's got some really, really fascinating materials for you. Then we're going to have a conversation. Feel free as we go along to put questions in the chat, and we'll have moments where we'll open it up for back and forth for everybody here. Dan, it's all yours.
Yeah. Thanks. So actually today I am going to share some ideas and things. One of the things that Steve and I have talked about often is this idea of leadership. So let's, as a leader, be provocative. So short of the Bible, leadership is the most talked about, written about, and least understood subject that I can think of. And so what that says is, well, wait a minute, if there's 5,000 plus listings on Amazon alone, you mean to tell me there was 5,000 different ideas about leadership, which tells me we don't really understand leadership at all. Then in talking with Steve, what he said is, I'm going to tell you, I'm not sure that even 3% of CEOs today are what we would say are great leaders. And so in my discussions with him, I couldn't square the circle about talking about leadership without talking about how does one develop to become a leader. So in other words, if I use the football, since we just finished the Super Bowl, if I use the analogy, it's great to see Brady throw to Gronk and have a touchdown. But what is it that they had to do to go from the 5-yard line to the end zone to get there? And that's really the development. And so rather than talk about leadership today, I'm going to talk about how do we develop to become leaders. And I want to share with you some statistics that I was able to grab that actually were stunning to me. So number one is 30% of the population, only 30% has even the innate capability of becoming a leader, which means 70% of people genetically, neurotransmitter and brain-wise, really don't even have that opportunity. But I'll also tell you this, if I were to sit and ask everybody in the audience today, who's the leader? I would bet the majority would say, well, when Steve's talking, he's the leader. And if Dan's talking, he's the leader. And if we take that out to a company, usually if we ask that question in a meeting, they'll look at the person with the highest title and go, he's the leader. That's really not the right answer. The right answer is everybody is leading all the time. And the question is, to what are you leading? And so within an organization, we have the sycophants, we have the obstructors, we have the people who are two-faced, We have the people who nod, yep, I'm happy to do that, and then they go and try to put everything in the wrong direction. We have the people in the organization who, when you came in and got the job they were hoping for, want to congratulate you, but really in the end resent the fact that they weren't chosen. And so as leaders, one of our jobs is to, in social emotional intelligence, really understand where people are and where we are within that scenario. So when we look at social emotional intelligence, we know now from scientific evidence, there's three things that matter to becoming a great leader. 92% is social emotional intelligence. The next skill set is cognitive intelligence. And the third is decision making. And Steve talks brilliantly about how do you make decisions. That's really opened up my thinking. And so when we look at social emotional intelligence, why is it that when we teach it, we get so little in return? Well, it's basically the same thing that's happening here right now. I'm basically teaching to the neocortex, your executive functioning. This is your decision making. This is your analytical mind. This is not a way that social emotional intelligence actually gets integrated into human beings. It's the limbic system. It's where your emotions are. It's where your drive is. It's how you feel. What are your fears? And the only way that that actually gets embedded in you is to have a concept, study it, habituate it, and get communication back into you. So one of the things I do is I actually teach a course of 48 lenses. And these are the different skills I think add up to social emotional intelligence. And every week you get a lesson. That's your neocortex. But then you actually have to go out in the world and express that skill set every day. And then there's worksheets that go with it so that you record what's going on for you. How did it impact you? What were your resistances? How did people react to you? So one of the skills we do is being disagreeable. So no matter what Steve would say to me today, I just disagree. Or any of you, you'd come in and say, hey, can I get a glass of water? And I'd go, not from me. Just to see what happens, that you would learn that actually being disagreeable, being on your own side, setting up boundaries are all skills of social emotional intelligence and great leadership, particularly if you're a people pleaser, particularly if you're empathetic to the point that you over empathize with people so that you actually diminish what it is you want to be a stand for. Right? So all of these things matter. So I'm hoping today too that we'll get into some interactivity. According to Gallup, 84% of the time, the wrong people are promoted. Think about that. 84% that means only 16% of the time are people promoted because they should be. So who do we promote? Well, we take the best salesperson and make him the sales manager. A good hunter, the last thing he wants is to be at a desk managing people. But he was number one on the list. So how do those people get promoted? Well, some of them get promoted because they've just been there the longest. Some of them get promoted because they're particularly adept at politics of managing up. Some of them get there because they were the best performer. So this isn't really a great way to do it. So I would tell you, Steve talked about my guarantee. I will guarantee you that if you're one of the people who only gets it right 16% of the time, if you pay me $10,000, I'll guarantee you that I can double your opportunity to pick the right person. Anybody know how I would do that? I know it's crazy. So here's what you do. You take three names of the three candidates that you want. You put them in a hat. You pick one of the three. You now have a 33% opportunity of picking the right person. You only had a 16% chance before. You've doubled your outcome. 71% of people say they've had an intolerable boss. And here's what's really most interesting. We are de-educating our population, and yet it's getting more intelligent. So the science says that every decade, your IQ will rise about 3 points. So between 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, you're going to get a 12-point rise in your intelligence. But you're now going to be talking about a whole host of things that don't make a whole lot of sense to anybody in terms of jobs or performance. So when we look at these three areas of social emotional intelligence, cognitive intelligence, and decision making, great leaders who are socially emotionally intelligent can synthesize and take in a load of data rapidly, synthesize it, and actually will make, for the most part, pretty good decisions. Leaders who, I need more information, Dan, I need more information, I can't make a decision, I'm willy-nilly about it, I'm not really sure what we could do. These are not great leaders. Great leaders will make the decision, and they're smart enough and socially aware enough that if it's not working, to pivot and to change, right? So this is important. So the 5 areas of social emotional intelligence, number 1 is self-awareness. So one of the things we do in development is we actually need to slow down in order to speed up. So whether this is mindfulness, whether this is meditation, can you actually get more present, be more embodied? We love intelligent people. We love people that are articulate. Rarely have I ever heard anybody say, what are you feeling in your body in a business meeting? What I just said, how did that just impact you? Well, if you're not doing that, you're not going to get the best out. To be a leader, you actually have to be emotional. You actually have to show vulnerability. You actually have to be able to talk about your fears and failures. So when I got on before all of you did, Steve said, so how are you feeling? I said, well, I'm fearful because I don't even know if I can talk for 90 minutes. Well, anybody who knows me know I can talk for 90 days, let alone 90 minutes, right? But I'm self-aware enough to know that I want to look smart. I want you to like me. I want to be accepted. I want people to get back to Steve and say, wow, that was really great. So I want all those things, but I have still, as accomplished as I might think I am, I'm still noticing that fear. I notice my heart is pulsing. I notice that my hands are really warm, right? I notice my butt really sitting in this chair, right? We don't talk about that in a business meeting. And then how about self-regulation? So my boss comes down and he just beats the hell out of me about how incompetent I am. What do I do with that? Oh, I call my team in and I just start yelling at them and my voice keeps going up and they're the problem and you're to blame and blah, 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 blah. And that's not great leadership. So the great leadership in slowing down and being self-regulated is, do I understand my own emotion? And can I actually, again, slow down so that I can integrate in that feeling, the feeling of fear or anger or whatever it is, because if I can own that emotion, I'm not triggered. I'm not in reactivity. I get to be much more intentional. And so one of the skills is, do you live a life of reactivity or do you live your life from intention? Then there's this whole idea of empathy. So I'm going to share with you lots of heroes today that I have. One of my heroes is a guy by the name of Carl Rogers, and one of the most important books you'll read is on becoming a person. And what he's basically saying is that for all of us, that we want to be seen in the here and now with positive regard, consistently and unconditionally. So if we're accurately seen in the here and now with positive regard, consistently and unconditionally, if you as a leader can bring that to your people, you will have an amazing group, an amazing team. So when I got promoted to different things, I would have people say, I'm really happy for you, and I want you to be successful. Early in my career, though, I had a different boss. He said, not only do I want you to be successful, I'm going to guarantee it. How do you think I felt about being seen by that person? That I really mattered, right? That there was actually an empathy and a love there that was really, do you think I would go over the fence to do anything for that person? Right? So interestingly, being a leader and leadership is all in our language. So business isn't, to me, is nothing more than language. Microsoft, that language that became what it became is a very different conversation than the language of owning a dry cleaning store. Both of them are conversations. Both of them have impact. Both of them create economic value. And so how we look at our conversation as a leader is really important. Right? Any questions so far? Is this hitting? Is this inspiring? Is this boring? Give me some feedback in the chat.
Andrew, why don't you, you're on mute. Go right ahead.
Oh, hey, thank you. So one feedback I'll give to you, you asked if it's resonating. So I've always been taught to be the leader that you want to follow. So, observe, right? And then imitate and put that into action, right? So be the leader you want to follow. So it's similar to what you're saying. When you're talking about language and that boss that said to you, hey, not only am I going to wish it for you, but I'm going to guarantee it for you. That's the leader you want to follow. So be that leader. And it's not about the legitimacy, right? The title or the experience, but also that referential leadership value as well. The respect from the troops, the people around your organization.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'd like to share with you, most of you don't know this audience, but the majority, I'd say 80% of this audience are people who I invited who actually showed up. So I have a lot of appreciation in my heart for them being here. And it also says they were at least willing to hear what I had to say. So that's very encouraging for someone who wants to be a leader.
And I told people they really should be here to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. So I want to take you through one of the things about being a leader in a company that's really important to me is, do I have a noble mission? Do I have something bigger than myself that a lot of people could go, wow, I'd really like to do that, right? One of the things that I want to have as a leader is a playbook and a strategic intent that people can see themselves in it, that they can see themselves in the plot, in the play, that they're bought into it, right, in a really big way. And the third is, I want to have an enemy. So I don't know how many of you have ever seen the movie Miracle on Ice. This is the 1980 US Olympic team. Okay, so a lot of you have seen that. A lot of you probably
The best
haven't.
movie ever made. If you haven't watched it in the last week, watch it tonight. Sorry.
Thank you, Bob. All right, so here's the deal. You and your partner, you and your spouse, you and your kid, you and your whatever, you both go to the movie.
No meat route?
Reduced.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bob, mute. So you come out of the movie, you go for coffee, and you say, what was the greatest scene in the movie? And they tell you what the greatest scene in the movie was, and you're like, did we go to the same movie? I didn't see, that's not what it was for me at all. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we become who we become and how we emerge to become who we can become. But the greatest scene in the movie is Herb Brooks keeps the skaters on the ice till about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And for 3 hours, he has them skate the length of the rink and says, where are you from? I'm from Minnesota. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from Nebraska. Nope, that's not it. Let's do it again. Where are you from? I'm from the University of Minnesota. I'm from Ohio State. No. So for 3 hours, he creates this back and forth, and his His assistant coaches are like, Herb, you're being abusive. They can't take this. People are throwing up. It's like unbelievable, right? It's just great. Finally, after about 3 hours, one of them says, USA. I'm from the USA. And they all figure it out that we're a team. And Herb has created himself an enemy. And in business, so I was on a thing yesterday with this brilliant guy, and he said it's really important in business to have an enemy. And he talks about how that can drive and motivate and put the right strategic intent, because business really is a competition, right? Well, life's a competition too. It doesn't mean you need to be an asshole. It just means to be that you can't just sit there like a wallflower. So I want to take you through as a leader. I'm going to show you, I'm not going to show you that right now. I'm going to show you this. Yeah, there we go. So let's see, we're going to share the screen. So here's my company, and it's called Intelliky. So I want to share with you is if you were potential people that said, hey, I'd like to learn more about your business, and I'd like to decide whether or not you're the kind of leader I would like to work with. So Intelliky is a Greek word. It came from Aristotle. And it's that which turns in each of us that turns our potential into reality. So within that, you can see here this circle. This is the circle of energy. This blue, this is eternal energy. Energy is never created and energy is never taken away. It's how it's used. And in the world in which I want you to play, I want you to use your left brain. So I want you to use focus and discipline, structure, and that sort of thing. But I also want you to use your right brain. I want you to bring your ideas. I want you to be innovative. I want you to think differently. And ultimately, I want both the company and you as individuals to unleash your genius, your gifts and light to bring this business into life and have it grow. And so in the center here, this is the individual, and this is the multi-personality and the becoming of who you can become. There's a certain energy in people that are going to be leading, in people that are going to accomplish, in people that want to do things bigger than themselves. They will unleash their energy. This, the lotus here, is the blossoming of becoming, both who can the business become and who can you become. Ultimately, and the lotus here really is the creative force that's within all of us. So if I hire you because I think you're a genius at what you do, and then I micromanage you, what would be the point? And so as a leader, I might want to put some guardrails in, but I really want to turn you loose to unleash the genius that you have. And here we have a compass. And this is the compass both for the company, for our values, our ideals, our purpose. This is what makes it tick. It's also the compass of social emotional intelligence. So we've all been with people where we go, could you upregulate your energy? So I'm talking like, and you just want to shake the person and go, what is it you want to say? There are other people who are talking like this and you can't get it, and you're just like, could you get grounded? So this is about self-awareness. On the left here, on the west end, this is what emotions are coming in. So as things become experiential, how are you relating to them? What impact are they having? What would people see? So we're now in COVID land. There's a lot of messy. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear. How are you as the leader? What are you showing? Are you doing messy well? Are you calm? Are you... So for me, one of the things as a leader, I know everybody's looking for certainty. In an era like we're in right now, clarity is much more important than certainty. So if I can look at a group of people and I have Ashley, who I talk with her and I go, how you doing? And I can just tell she's worn out. I can see, I say, so how long are you working? She goes, I'm up at 7 and I'm still working at midnight. Well, as a leader, I want to refocus her and go, you need to go to the movies. You need to watch some Netflix. No, every 2 hours, I want you to have a break, and I don't want you working past 6 p.m. But if I'm talking to Larry, I get with Larry that he's really fearful, and I see that he's not really producing. And I want to spend some time with him and really dig into, tell me, Larry, what's going on? What are you feeling? Because here's what I'm feeling. And if I can be vulnerable and I can share what I'm feeling, I'll give permission to Larry to do the same. I don't want to say, Larry, what are you feeling? And he goes, Dan, you never show an emotion. What, are you out of your mind? That's not what business does. So, and the right side then is this output that we're talking about. So this is one way, as a creative, as a CEO, as a leader, this is how I'm thinking about this company. So as I talk to people, I'm going to be sharing this story because I think every great brand has a story. And then I want to see, where's the buy-in? What repels people? What could make it stronger? How can I attribute to them bringing this to life in a bigger way than I can do for myself? So the other thing I'm doing is, I think I told everybody, I want to train the next generation of leaders as a part of what I do. And so this is my logo for that. And you're like, well, what the hell is all that? So again, this is the ring of energy. And I know it's bad to say masculine, feminine, so I'm going to say yin and yang, but there is both, right? Ivan's on today, and I'll talk a little bit about what he and I do together. But in terms of the archetypes, right, there is the warrior and there's the lover. There's also the masculine and the feminine. And when we don't have those aligned within us, both masculine and feminine energy, we're fragmented and we're not where we need to be. So this is the circle that creates that ring of energy. The background here is the quantum field of all possibility. So as a leader, most people will work in a company, they'll go to a meeting, and the meeting will be, okay, let's do the strategic plan. And they start with where they are, and they figure 1 to 3 years out, what would we look like? That to me is incremental and not where we need to be. So this is the quantum field of possibility. And where I've always worked in my career was way out there to see the biggest possibility that I could see. And then I would re-engineer it back to where I was in the present. So it's this ability to reframe our world is where we can actually become who we can become. This little guy here, this is all about neural networks. This is the neuroplasticity of the brain, so that we can change, that we actually can change our minds and become who we can become. In my feeling, we're moving from the individual and cult CEO leader into a collective intelligence, the building of ecosystem. And the collective intelligence is not that we think alike, it's that we actually get the genius and gifts of everyone's thinking. And collectively, we will make the best decision. It takes the biases and moves them to the margin. It doesn't make the people who had them wrong. So it's a very inclusive. So what we could say here is, Bob, I know that you wanted us to go a certain way, and I know we've chosen to go a different way, but I really do appreciate your input on this, and I really hope you can get in the boat and row with us. And just the fact that he's heard and just the fact that he's acknowledged gives us a much better opportunity of getting the buy-in that we need. This is all about mindfulness. This is the heart-centered, this is the empathy, that if we can't bring these things in, grit and resilience, then we're not going to have as good an opportunity. This compass is the same as the compass on the Entelechy logo. This triangle is the 3 dimensions of a human being. These points, in order for us to be successful, we actually need to be grounded. But at the same time, we have to be able to move up into the creative universe. And again, if we slow down, can we actually hear the voices? So I believe a lot of what I do, what I'm doing right now, is actually channeling much more than I'm thinking at this point. I'm just in flow and letting what seems to come out, come out. So I know that's a little bit woo-woo, but if we're going to look at innovation, we have to get beyond what we think is just the normal. So when we have businesses, Dan, you don't understand our business. This is how we do business. No, I actually do understand your business, and that's why you're incremental. That's why you're not growing exponentially. That's why you're not defeating the competition. That's why you have margin compression, because you're not doing anything that's unique. So what you do is you manipulate. What does that mean? Well, you do BOGOs. So buy one, get one free, buy one, get 150 off, right? And you keep discounting your value because you're just you walk in a drugstore and you see 32 shampoos, not very interesting. So this is the story that I feel, if I'm going to bring somebody in, would this be compelling? So with that in mind, anybody want to join either of my companies?
Dan, we need to talk. I tell you, this is a good opportunity. I think, you're talking to a bunch of very conscious leaders here. And I think what you're saying makes sense to a lot of people. Can I see a show of hands if it makes sense here? I think you're talking to a very specific group. But I think one of the key questions we want to answer, the social emotional intelligence, anybody who's been a leader, anybody who leads teams in this world today and wants to do it successfully understands that. How do you go about developing that with people who don't have it?
Well, good question. It's actually, I won't develop it with you. It's what do you want to dedicate and commit to? And so one of the ways I have a model of personal transformation, and it starts with what's your deepest yearning. I want to be loved. I want to matter. I want to know I exist. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to make a difference. I want to fulfill my purpose. So what is it that is your deepest yearning, and will you engage it? And if you engage your deepest yearning, as opposed to move to your Netflix addiction, your food addiction, your drug addiction, and all those things that you're numbing yourself out with, if you actually engage those yearnings, those addictions diminish dramatically. So, Steve, I just like a hug right now. If I get a hug, I'm good. So now what did I learn? Well, if I'm learning that just asking for what I want, that someone will do that, I'm liberating, right? And I'm actually getting this new insight. If I get this new insight, then I can liberate to try something new because I've got more confidence in myself. The more I do these new behaviors, the more I actually change the neurons. So what fires together wires together. If I do new behaviors and I get those to stick, old behaviors will drop away. And that's the process. And I dedicate to that over and over and over. It's really a dedication game. Part of it is, like I said, it's not theory. It's actually working in your feelings, in your limbic system, in your desires, in what drives you. Am I secure enough to want to ask people for help? A lot of us feel like if I ask something, they'll think I'm stupid, right? So we fake it. Or how many of you have heard of imposter syndrome, right?
That's huge. It's huge out there.
Right. So one of the things that, and I've done a lot of work. So let me just give you the quick background here. I did a master's for 2 years. I did Freud, Jung, and Adler. I did attachment theory, so John Bowlby, education principles, John Dewey, humanism, so Maslow, Viktor Frankl, Brad Blanton, Gestalt, all of that, the existentialists in neuroscience. And I would tell you that I wish I had this 30 years ago, right? Because I actually it's not that I learned the theories, although I did, but the course was about how does it apply to your own life? What impacted you? What they said, was that really true for you? It's a very painful game to play in a way that you actually strip yourself of your false self. So if you want to really know how you do this, if you take a look at all the things that you do to build this beautiful castle that you're in. So for most of us, when we grow up, let's back up. 0 to 7, we have no brain filter. So whatever is downloaded in us is our belief system. Money's bad, women are bitches, men are angry, whatever happens in your home, money's dirty, people with money are cheap, people with money are angry. Whatever the belief system is in the family, in school, and in society in general, this is what we call socialization. And so the real work is, how do I, as an adult, move from the childhood formation that was formed for me into adulthood transformation, which is me now deciding what's so. So what happens with that is we all have mental maps and patterns. To the extent that we can identify a pattern, we actually then make it conscious, we can look at it, and we can actually have a choice as to whether or not it still runs us. To the extent that your subconscious has all those and you're not pretty aware, you run in reactivity. So how you do this is really a lot of work. It's a lot of work. What is your attachment style? Was it avoidant? Was it insecure? Was it secure? Some people have a really good childhood, but a lot of us don't have a great childhood, right? And so to the extent that we understand our attachment, we have skills that we can then deploy. But at the end, you need good mentors and people that will teach and hold you accountable and have the dedication to actually do the work.
Yeah. And
right?
could I, this is, I think, again, we're preaching to the choir here, and I think it's brilliant. What I'd love for you to share, because you've run some companies, you've done turnarounds, you've done, exponential growth. Could you give some real specifics? Because I think this is brilliant and uncommon in most of our organizations today. So when you took over companies, how did you go about really fostering a culture like this?
Yeah, sure. So the first one I had, I was 26 years old, and I was in the apparel business, and I got hired by a small company called Levi Strauss. And as you all know, they're the 501 men's jeans business. And Levi was out at the gold rush in the 1800s, and he had this denim, and he built jeans for men, and it became this multi-billion-dollar enterprise. And this is a men's company, and it's basically a 501 jeans business, one jean, and it's a $2 billion company. And I get hired to run a $7 million women's business. So I'm already I'm 7 million of a $2 billion plus company. I'm in women's wear versus menswear. So I'm 26 years old, and I get paid a fortune, plus a bonus, plus stock options. And in the time between I get hired and I show up, they bring a guy from this men's jeans business who's used to selling one jean for $1 billion, and they bring him down as a group vice president. And the first day I get there, he comes to see me and says, come down and see me. And I go to see him, and he says, I don't really like your product. So I'd like you to go to New York, and I want you to talk to the fabric company, and I want him to take back all the undyed fabric and tell him we'll give him 3 yards of denim because we don't screw our vendors. Well, there's nothing in this conversation that talks about me other than I might be out of a job. And at 26, I had bought myself an Alfa Romeo and had a 3-bedroom townhome in Sausalito overlooking Tiburon and the Bay. And I just wasn't giving that up on the first day. So I said, okay, tell you what, give me a couple days, just got here, let me get back to you. So what I did was I went and I talked with all the stores. I took a look at the product. I talked with my sales force. And without boring you to tears, I went back and went, hey, Jim, got a minute? And he goes, sure, come on in. And I said, listen, here's the good news. I'm going to New York, but we have a little bit difference of opinion about how this is going to go. So I'm prepared to take this $7 million business to 49 million by the end of the year. Are you in? And the guy just about dropped out of his chair. But Levi was an incredible company that actually empowered the people it hired. And he went, you're going to do what? And I explained to him all the different things that I was going to do. And so he goes, go for it. And as I'm leaving the office, he says, oh, and by the way, if you don't lose me $1 million, you're not driving fast enough. Now, talk about support, and I'm in your corner. And at 26, most of you know me as fairly arrogant anyway, but at 26, I was really arrogant. And I said, listen, I'm Jewish. We never lose $1 million. And we created this really dynamic relationship. And what happened out of that was this is, I think, part of my genius is I reframe the world. I never accept any situation I'm in. I'm always looking how I can do it better. And I inherited a team of people underneath me, some of whom just wanted to do it the old way. And I actually asked them to leave. And in some cases, they got a different job in the company. And in some cases, it was time for them to leave. And then when I brought in my team of people, just like I did with my logo, I gave them the vision of what this thing could be. And it became the largest selling pant in the history of the women's business. We did 6 million pair in 1 year. We grew the business from 7 to 130 million in 36 months. And taking those concepts and development of fabrics that we did, we surrounded it with other areas, and it became a $500 million segment in a $2.5 billion company. And I think from the early stage, I looked for really good people, and I was willing to teach them everything I knew, and I wanted them to succeed, and I never put them in harm's way. So if there was ever an issue, I always took the blame.
How did you maintain a social emotional openness with everybody?
Well, I'd love to tell you I did, but actually that's some of my failures. So I really didn't like my boss at all, and I used to talk behind his back, and that cost me being trustworthy. So I would say that's one of the failures that I had. One of the failures was I wasn't getting promoted, and I quit. After a certain amount of time, I think I was there 6 years, I left. And I went in and said, you know what, I'm done here. And they called me upstairs, and I had been to the board. I had pretty good recognition in the company. And I basically said, hey, I'm not getting promoted, and I'm watching mediocre people get promoted. And they went, Dan, you have the second best bottom line in the company. We have no one to replace you. Maybe you would think it would be your job to find somebody who could do that. Right? So ultimately, I did leave. Ultimately, they brought in 3 other people, and ultimately the business folded. And that happened to me on numerous occasions in my career. I would say at 26, I was running on just pure luck in a way, and how I saw the world. And I loved my team of people, right? And we were getting so much winning in this game that it was probably easy. Which takes me then to Liz Claiborne. Here's a company that's, again, a multi-billion-dollar public company. For 5 years, they had a business that was at 400 million, had crashed to 250. In 5 years, had 5 different leaders. It was a mess. And I got that business from 250 back to 390 in 18 months and got fired because I was difficult to work with. So when I got hired, the chairman said, I don't care what you do. This is the crown jewel of the company. It's taking our stock price in the wrong direction. Do whatever is required. Well, Liz Claiborne, first of all, was a women's company. Second of all, Liz was iconic in the industry, and she had trained this staff of people. And if Liz were there was no doubt in my mind she would have grown, but the team didn't. And so I really struggled with that group to get things done. And I have to say that was one where my social emotional intelligence wasn't good. It was where I was just out of pure force going to make this work. And I remember I was in Italy in a hotel room that was poorly lit, and my fabric people were supposed to be able to get what I needed, and they couldn't. And I'm in the room sewing a plaid piece of fabric with thread the way I want it, right? That wasn't a great idea when you want your team to feel like they're valued, but they wouldn't give me what I wanted. And so that was one where, again, great outcome, but cost me a lot. So I would argue that really my social emotional intelligence has gotten much better in the last 7 years than it was probably in the first 40.
But what made that switch for you? I mean, obviously, the great Mark Twain quote, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. Comes into play here. We learn best from our experience. But how did you make the switch, and how do you help people do that today?
The switch is getting real with who you are. So I grew up in a household where I was put on a pedestal. I was perfect. I was the favored son. I was the favored cousin. I could do no wrong. And therefore it wasn't, so everything was about achieving, getting to the next thing, so the bigger house, the bigger job, the bigger salary, the bigger car, right? That was my way. So love to me was very unconditional based on achievement. That's a pretty vacuous way of living.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think ultimately for all of us, we get to a point of pain and suffering where the old game doesn't work. And so I ended up with a beverage company, which went under during the financial crisis. Cost me my marriage, cost me my house, my savings, my car was repossessed, and I lived in a car for 2 years. That is an abyss that most people aren't willing to go to. So they'll play it much safer than I will. But I've decided always to live life as an adventure, and it's taken me a fair amount of time to reemerge. But it was getting that education, that 2 years of schooling, that made all the difference. And I'm really grateful for that. I wish I had had that 30 years ago. So I think you need to work with mentors and teachers and people who actually bring this to the fore. And so one of the things that I want to do is take this and put it in public high schools. So my 48 Lens course will have a 501c3 that will take this into high schools.
Dan, can you give an overview of that program? Because this is the kind of specifics I think would be really helpful for people. What are the sort of the lenses, the perspectives, the principles that you're sharing to make the difference?
Yeah, so it's really quite simple. It's a 14-week program. Every week there are 4 lenses that we have you work on. So in the first week, one of the first questions is, since it's on personal power, influence, and persuasion, just what's your relationship to power? And everybody's got their own belief about it. And it's not necessarily their own, it's the one that was inculcated in them early. One of the things we look at is, what are your family rules, myths, and beliefs? Because if we don't understand, see, when we're born, we think we get the DNA of our parents, but it's actually our lineage. And so in my family, womanizing and cheating on women was generational. Well, guess what? All of those molecules and all of that trauma and all of that everything is actually born into the next generation. So one of the things I did was to bring that into the light with my own kids and say, this is what's happened in my family. I don't want it happening anymore. And I cut that off, right? And that vulnerability, that truth telling, that sitting with parents is important, right? One of the things that we do is, are you willing to indict your parents? Because my belief is that you can't get to forgiveness before you've actually indicted. And that's a really amazing process, because most children and most parents aren't honest with each other. And this is what deepens a relationship. So this family rules and myths and beliefs is important. One of the things we have you do in the first week is to pick a hero. So I picked Buckminster Fuller, but you could pick Nelson Mandela, or you could pick, anybody that you want. And we study them for the 14 weeks to figure out how is it that these people who were born just like you and me, how did they deal with adversity? How did they become great leaders? How did they set up a value system? So again, it's mirroring these different things. One of the weeks is we talk about the drama triangle, and do you live your life in drama and the games people play? So can we have an adult to adult conversation, or are we doing adult to child, or are we doing child to child? So if you're blaming each other, you're in the child to child. If you're in the adult, you're taking responsibility for who you are in the transaction. When you speak to me that way, Steve, I feel like I'm not valued. I didn't say you're a bad guy. What I said is the way you speak to me is, this is what I feel. You have a choice now to say, I'm sorry about that. How could I better speak with you? How would it be more empowering in our discussion to do whatever? Or you could be reactive and say, I don't really care. How I'm going to speak is how I'm going to speak, and that's just the way it is. Right? So one of the lessons is we learn to live from a life of intention versus a life of reactivity in that week. So can you ask for what you want? We take a look at, there's two sides of the coin. One is I'm not good enough, and the other is who are you to deserve all this greatness that you're getting? This is part of the imposter syndrome. So we take a look at that, right? And we work on different things, and then you get these exercises each week, and then we come back and we unpack it. And so it's what we do is we create a safe container. It's very vulnerable. By the 8th week, I'd say even by the 6th week of the group I just had, the things that came out were unbelievable. And there were so many people there to put the guardrails in, to give empathy, to give support, to say how, honored they were to be a part of it. And this is this element of community. This is this collective, right? That I think is so important. How do you ask for things? So one of the things that I'd like to show everybody here that I talked with Steve about, this might be helpful.
Well, Dan's bringing that up. I just want to reiterate, if you've got questions, I've got a ton of questions with Dan. I just want to say something about this. I mean, Dan and I really got to know each other by actually having different points of view on a lot of key leadership principles. And we each started making more and more sense to each other. That's why I invited Dan here. I'm also glad to see Bob Pizzini here, because we had Bob on before. Again, leadership is not a fixed perspective, and there's some brilliance to be had here. Dan, go ahead and share that piece right there.
Okay, here we go. So let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, so this is what's called a developmental model. This is an existential model. There's Piaget has a model, Erickson has a model, spiral dynamics is a model. There's lots of these developmental models out there. And so this is what I did over 2 years, was every month was looking at this. We don't go from here to here. It's moment by moment how we emerge. So sometimes I'm here, sometimes I fall back to here, sometimes I'm here. So within the first 6 months, this is where we are. So the regressive pole is survival. The progressive pole is trust. What this really impacts is my aliveness, and it's my relationship with fear and danger. So Adler would say that we are born in an inferior position, because if mom doesn't feed us, if mom doesn't keep us warm, if the primary caregiver doesn't change our diaper, we probably don't survive. If we live in a house where there's a lot of anger and stress and tumult, and that in a baby gets embedded into our nervous system. When we come into the world, we literally are a ball of energy. Our mind doesn't even fully develop till we're in our 20s. And so everything is what we're feeling and what the energy is within the environment. So if I'm in survival mode all the time, if I hear a lot of noise, if I'm crying and they change my diaper, but I was hungry, I'm in survival mode. That's not a great place to live, because there the world isn't safe. The world's not abundant. No one cares about me. That's 0 to 6 months. Then we move to hunger and affirmation. This is the terrible twos. And this is for men. I don't know as much about women, but for men, this is where their masculine will gets broken. Right? So the hunger here is the regressive and the affirmation is the progressive pole. This is all about play. Steve, stop that. Steve, don't touch. Steve, go to your room. Steve, take a time out. Steve, I told you not to do that. Steve, and then she hits you, and then whatever happens here. This goes on every 20 seconds. So you're in your twos. You're just beginning to say, I'll go away from mom's apron. I'll go 5 feet. I'll look back at her. I'll see where that's going. I feel secure. I come back. I hug the apron. Now I go 8 feet. I come back. This is part of the security and attachment. Go ahead, Steve. Mommy's here. Go ahead, explore. How many moms say that? Not many. All right, so reactivity and assertion, same thing is about intention and saying no. So people pleasers, particularly, that want to be liked, that have fear of rejection, they don't have boundaries. They don't really say no. Conformity expression, if you want to talk about how that works, try being in a gang. So to me, I always ask people, what's the opposite of courage? And they go fear and cowardice. It's actually conformity. This is the enculturation of they that Heidegger talks about. It's the herd mentality that Nietzsche talks about. So how do I belong in a group and yet express my truth? So the famous scene from The Godfather, when Barzini's at the head of the table and a couple of the kids have been killed, and they're talking about selling drugs, and Brando says, can't do that. And they say, but sir, you have all the judges. And he said, I've never refused a favor, but I can't get the judges to do this. So he speaks his truth, but says, I still love you guys, still want to be a part of you, but this is a bridge too far. I can't do it. So they agree that they're going to sell it. He's not going to participate. Here is where I think I spent a lot of my life, was striving, and I was always hitting the next notch on the wall, but without a purpose and without something bigger than myself. This is the quiet desperation that men have in their lives because they're ATM machines. Really, men have 2 options. You can be an ATM machine, or you can go in the military, and in both cases, you're expendable. And then ultimately, am I authority? Do I hold responsibility for my own life? In the world of wokeness that we live today, we don't ask people to be responsible. We don't ask people to be accountable. We don't ask people to live their dream, right? And I won't even go up to the transcendental, because that's just for a whole different group of people. So let me show you one. I do love videos because I think sometimes they say things a whole lot better than I do. So let me show you share the screen. This is Dr. Ed Tronick, and he did an incredible thing. So if you want to understand a breach and then how to repair a breach with a child, this is about attachment. We'll take a look at how this works.
I think you have it on silent there, Dan. Nope. You had it. There you go. Better.
This is something that we started studying 3 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment that the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age. And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby.
Yeah, it's hard to hear. If you can turn the volume up, that'd be great.
World, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. That's really what.
That sound is coming through the speaker. You need to let it come through Zoom or share computer sound when you share the screen.
Go to the carrot next to the
Baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of him.
Just stop the screen sharing and restart it while clicking the share computer sound.
Screechy sound at the mother.
Okay, hold
Come
on.
on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes,
Oh,
when
man.
they don't get the normal reaction, they react.
Okay, maybe this isn't a great idea.
Talk about your point, though, Dan. I think it's a really important one.
Yep. So the point here is that what happens here is mom is playing, and so the baby is mirrored by the mom, right? So if she puts her hands up, the mom puts her hands up. She leans forward. She's engaged. Then the mom turns around and then comes back and has a still face. And the baby starts doing all the same play, and the mom does nothing. She just sits there. And the baby then all of a sudden starts to get, come on already. And she starts screaming and trying all these different things to get the attention. Then all of a sudden, mom comes back to play. Well, these breaches happen for us all the time, right? And it's not the breach that matters. It's the repair. And so in relationship, do you know, as in your ego, do you need to be right? If there's a breach, do you need to be right? Do you punish by silence? Do you punish? We're not going to talk about that now. I'll do that another time. Right? So this is how we relate with our partner, our kids, people in general. So it's not the breach that matters as much as the repair.
That's an important point, I think.
Yeah.
Because humans, we're going to have our share of bumps in the road. The question is, what do you do to fix that? Again, it's like mail order. The great breakthrough in mail order was Land's End when there was no problems with returns. So now we could trust you.
Right.
How you fix a problem is really the best way to build trust. Yeah.
Yep. And to say, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That's not easy for a lot of people to say, I'm sorry.
Dan, when you're offering your program where you're promising a 5x return on their investment, what are the fundamentals that you have to build into that organization in order to be able to realize a return like that? Because that's pretty bold.
For the most part, what I do is I work with the CEOs to say, I don't need you to hire more people and I don't need you to spend more marketing money. I want to focus you differently. Your people are talented. In most companies, way too many initiatives, way too much complexity, way too much overwhelm, right? So what I do is I basically look for 3 to 5 levers that if all we did was that, what would happen? So what is it, the 3 to 5 things that you could do that would most exponentially leverage your business? So just getting that focus is one thing. The other thing that I do is I have a pretty big qualifier. So I'm an exponential player. I'm not an incrementalist. I won't do well. If you want to grow 50, 52, 55, 58, we wouldn't be a good fit, right? So what I'm interested in is I understand your product offering. I have 8 different ideas about how we could double your sales in 36 months. What would you think about that? I don't know, you know. Oh, that's really interesting. Tell me about that, right? And so it's a qualifier of tell me why you're exponential versus not incremental. Tell me about the level of risk you're willing to take. Share with me some ideas of where you've imported an idea from an industry that's not your own. Tell me about your culture. Do you reward innovation? Do you reward taking a chance, or do you ask people to park their brain at the door? Tell me if I want to talk with you to see, are you coachable? Right? I want to hear about some of the things you've tried and why they didn't work. How long did you? So when I went in and did turnarounds, I'd love to tell you that it was all this esoteric thing that I did for them. A lot of it was good blocking and tackling. And they would say, we already tried that. And I go, yeah, I know. And let me guess, it lasted 21 days. And they'd go, how do you know? Well, this tackling is, see, it doesn't happen in 21 days. It happens in 6 months to a year. But there are other things like, for example, I did a turnaround for Crabtree and Evelyn. And I did I wanted to change the supply chain because I knew we were getting screwed. And I inherited a company where the owner said, if the cost of what we're buying hits our margin, I'm good with it. And he never negotiated, right? That's like the craziest thing I ever heard. So I held a global supply chain conference, one in Connecticut and one in London. And I invited guys to a really fancy luncheon in Connecticut. They came with Porsches and Mercedes and Jaguars, and it was fat. I said to them, I said, you know, there's some cars out here I definitely want rides in before you guys go home. So I really want to thank all of you for coming and having our lunch. And I only have 2 slides for you. So here's the good news. See, the good news is the industry cost of goods is 32%, and my cost of goods is 32%. So congratulations. But here's the bad news. You see this bar of soap? This bar of soap that I have in my hand is ours, and it has a 3.5 premium price. My 32% cost of goods is actually 96, and it should be 11. So I'm not here to blame anybody. If I were in your shoes, I'd be doing the same thing, but you can't use me to make the quarter anymore. So as of today, I don't want to fire anybody. And it's not that I don't want you here. I want you here. But here's now what it's going to take. So number one, I need to understand where my company's costing you money. If you're just overcharging us, that's an easy fix. But if we're asking you to do things that are outside the norm, I need to know that. Number two, I need you to bring me 3 innovative ideas before you take them to market, so I can choose which one are mine. And I listed what it would be required now, and I was able to reduce the cost of goods 40% in 6 months. And on a $125 million business, that's a lot of money. It's in the millions, right? Now, so that's part of it. Part of it is I inherited 1,200 SKUs. So an SKU is a stock keeping unit. So for a $75 million company, nothing sold more than 1%. So what I did is I went from 1,200 SKUs to 600 overnight. And then I had everyone in my team and my stores and everybody else calling me to say, you're an idiot. And I'd go, I know. But the good news here is that I'm actually going to focus you, and I'm going to focus the customer on what matters and what's important. And so we went from, in 6 months, every major metric, units per transaction, dollars per transaction, number of transactions, every potential retail metric was up in double digits within 6 months. So as a leader, I could have said, oh, I'm sorry that I offended you. Sure, I'll keep all the SKUs. No, right? And so as a leader, I looked at the business differently. So I had come out of the apparel business. And if you know anything about Crabtree and Evelyn, they had the most beautiful floral patterns you can imagine. So I went and I licensed out my floral patterns for sleepwear and put in robes and pajamas for women. It became one of the largest selling categories. We sold tea and biscuits as a part of our offering. And I had gone to Paris, and I went to this old tea emporium called Mariage, which was like an 18th century emporium with the real tea from China in these beautiful canisters. And I asked the guy if I could take pictures, and he said, sure. And I take all these pictures and I bring them back, and I put a tea wall in the back of the store, and I put a tea bar in for tasting, and I hired a guy to do samplings. And I ended up selling more tea per square foot than I did personal care products. That's kind of unusual. I took a look at the thing and I said, we are selling a product that is so beautiful, people don't use it. They put it in their bathroom, in the box, in its beautiful packaging, and they never open it. So I said, okay, let's do this. Let's take this gift business and keep it, but let's transfer it to everyday usage. I got a 6 times lift by doing the same product in a little bit different bottle without putting it in a beautiful box. Right? I took a look at it and said, if I'm going to everyday usage, I need a hair care system, and I don't have one. So I went to France and negotiated a license with Fido, which is like the world's most phenomenal natural hair care game. Talked him into giving, he'd never done it before. I brought in aromatherapy before aromatherapy was a big deal. And so I could just see all these different things that would attract people. I didn't need more people to do that. I just needed to get some people to say, hey, would you manage the sleepwear thing? You're in purchasing. Could you manage that one person? Oh, and by the way, I'm going to incent you that if we can grow that business, then I'm going to give you commissions and more money. Right? And so I was sitting in a meeting one day, and they bring me this candle holder with a candle. I go, how much is this? And she goes, $27. I go, $27? I wouldn't pay 27 cents. How much are you paying for this container? And she tells me the number. I said, okay, who's the sales guy? She said, Tom. I said, do me a favor, because I work in the meeting. I don't work after the meeting. Go to your office, call Tom, tell him I'm going to pay X, and I'll buy 10,000 of them. And she looks at me like, dude. And I think, like, I don't know if I told her it was like $1.60 I'd pay for it, and it was $6. And she's like, you're nuts. And I go, I know, just go to the office and do it, and then come back and tell me. So like 20 minutes later, she rolls back in. I said, so what'd Tom say? He took the order. I go, great. Nice job. I don't think I could have done that on my own. I said, so let me ask you, do you think we did a good job? She goes, absolutely. I go, no, we didn't. What do you mean? Did he argue about the price? No. Then we didn't get him to where we should have gotten. So just know that so now this is a teaching moment that you can bring value, right? And it's okay to negotiate. They were a group that never had done negotiation. So now as a leader, I'm actually teaching this, and she's getting to see she gets credit for it because she did it, right? And she's like, wow. And then she could do more of it. And that reinforcement then brings this confidence, and they get to emerge to be better.
That's great. So folks, any questions for Dan? I mean, this is a great conversation. There's a lot of directions to go. I've got plenty more, but I want to give everybody a chance. If you've got a question, just take yourself off mute. Are we good?
Hey, Dan, great stuff. Quick question. I've got an e-commerce store, a product, fairly low price point, under $10. Perhaps you could comment a little bit on that kind of an environment and ways to perhaps take a look at product and how to, how to build sales.
Dan, can I ask you can I add to what Larry asked for? Larry's got a low end. Andrew and I have a high end. How do you deal with each end of the spectrum?
Well, yeah, so that's great, actually. So there's 2 ways to make money. One is to be the low-cost producer, in which case you snare the market share. And the other is to be the high-end brand. So again, from the world I come from, the Armanis, the Fendis, the Guccis, that's the high end, right? And then you've got the middle market that sells at Macy's. In COVID, they're getting crushed. The high end's doing well. The Amazon basics are doing well. So it's that low cost thing. So for Larry, because I think it's the strap, right, that you have.
Correct.
Yeah. So what I would say to you as an inventor is, if you want to grow the business, you need more than one SKU. So in other words, what does that strap do? Well, the strap makes it more efficient. The strap makes me easier for so rather than look at I'm in the strap for a phone, I'm in the accessory business. And if I'm in the accessory business, I have a pretty big landscape of things that I can bring to multiple product. I'm much more of the idea that if I can get you as a customer to buy 5 things from me, that's a cheaper acquisition than always getting a new customer, right? So if you, the customer, like this, I would be doing some focus groups or some surveys. What else would you like? But more importantly, I do the Steve Jobs thing and bring them things they didn't even know they needed. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Good.
So how many customers do you currently have?
A small amount, under 500. But we're one-time customers to a
Okay.
large extent. You know,
Do you-
some
do you-
repeat orders, but not many.
So do you have a content campaign? So in other words, Apple is constantly doing new things, right? How are you piggybacking off of that? So Apple comes out and says, hey, we're going to be doing a flip phone. You ought to be thinking already, what's the accessory for that? Right? They come, the iPod, right? What's the accessory for that? Is it a case? Is it what is it?
Mhm.
And I would say that accessories could be for more than just that. If I were you, what I would look at would be some other people, because one of the things I talk about to grow exponentially is all about strategic alliances and joint ventures. So who out there is selling Apple accessories but doesn't have what I have? And I would be approaching them and saying, why don't you add this to your thing and we can do a revenue share? So who's doing earbuds out there, right? Who's doing cases out there?
Right. Exactly.
Who's doing something else out there, right? There are groups of Apple aficionados, whether on Facebook or LinkedIn. I would start getting myself into those groups and seeing what they're talking about. Are you selling on Amazon?
No, not yet. But that's something that we've been looking at, doing a store there. But not yet. Right now, we're just selling on our own website on the B2C side, but we also have a B2B side where we do corporate names and logos.
Yeah, so stop thinking about Amazon and just pull the trigger. I don't mean to be rude, but thinking about it isn't going to help, right?
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. No, I hear you. We've confronted that, and it's something where we've got to do. I mean, they're the big behemoth part of the marketplace.
So when I look at a product, I look at geography, I look at channel. If I had what you had, I'm sorry I didn't look at it, but is it a solid strap? What is it?
Yeah, it's actually it's a flexible strap. It goes on the back of your phone like this. It's very thin, very light. It's elastic. It has hugs the case really well, and we sell it on a simple packaging like this. This is one of our product cards for e-commerce, and it's also very flexible, so you can drop it in a regular envelope for mailing. So it's good for incentive campaigns and marketing programs from the membership groups. Yeah.
Does it only come in one color?
Oh heavens, no! We've got 60 designs on the website. Within a couple of weeks, we'll have another 10 up. We'll have over 70 designs, and that's just on the B2C side. On the B2B side, it's corporate names and logos. So we put whatever the company's colors or logos. So example, C-suite, say they wanted to do that, we put that corporate name and logo on it. And
okay, so if I look at those 70, if I look at those 70 SKUs, 10% of them doing 80% of the business?
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that there's a large collection, but and we've only been doing it. The e-commerce has only been up since November, but that is what we're finding, about 10%, maybe 15%. Once in a while, we'll get an order that it's unusual, some strap we haven't sold before, but most of the time they fall into a very defined pattern.
Yeah, so I'd get rid of the ones that are taking away because it's working capital. The other thing I'd be looking at is an influencer. So I'd go on Instagram and see who the influencers are and send them some and say, hey, I'd love to do something with you on this.
Right. Okay.
Right. And then I would probably take a look at a high-end fashion idea and a more basic idea, but there's probably multiple price points and design and et cetera that I could be doing. Right. But I also think that, like I said, if you're in the one business, you're going to live and die on the one business. I'm much more of a highway with lots of on-ramps. And so that's why I think, am I in the plane business or train business, or am I in transportation? Transportation is a higher arc, and accessories is a big market. So rather than have all that working capital tied up in 40 things that are meaningless, right? And then the other thing is, do you work through any distributors? Are you in any catalogs?
Right, not yet. We've talked to several promotional product distributors, but actually not accessory type companies, more promotional products on the B2B side.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Dan, I want to suggest, I think, Larry, I had a really good conversation with Larry. There's a lot more to have here, but I think you've given people some generally very strong ideas, and you can continue that. Larry, for you, Dan, and for everybody, Dan's contact information is there. Dan, I know you've got a program about to kick off. You want to tell us just a little bit about that?
Yep. So that is my personal power and influence program. And it's a 14-week program. And as I say, it has 48 lenses in it. And we meet 2 hours a week for 2 hours. We meet once a week for 2 hours over that 14 weeks. So it's a 28-hour program. And there's a lesson. Then we spend time each week. How did the previous week impact you? What'd you learn? That sort of thing. And then you get the worksheets. And at the end, we go through some different things. And so, like, one of the things we went through on the last week that we just did, what's your kryptonite? What's the one thing that absolutely collapses you, that puts you out of the game? Which is a really cool question. And so for one of the people, they couldn't figure it out. And everybody was, and I just basically said, so here's the deal. Your kryptonite is your kindness, that you don't advocate for yourself, that people walk on you, that you don't deliver in a way that suits you. And I've had several conversations with that person and how it's changed their life. That because that's now conscious, they can still be kind, and they have permission to go for what they want. So,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I think it's fantastic. And Michael, who's here, was on that program, and he's welcome to share how it, and I've worked with him for about 6 years on different things. He's one of my slower students. So,
yeah, I would thank you, Dan. I would urge everybody. I just got through the course a couple of weeks ago. I've known Dan for 6-7 years now, and I've actually experienced Dan's change and gone through the ship with him, and he's given me so many tidbits and things. And I'm a fairly seasoned guy. I've got fair successes under my belt, and it was. I put in. It's hard to put into the words because there's so much of the knowledge that all of us here on the screen, from our own life experiences, know. The stuff that we just know. Dan takes the stuff that we know and helps us look at it differently, and that's really what happened during this course. And I've described it as kind of being on a Candyland board or Chutes and Ladders. And what compelled me every week was that, first of all, we had a group that was very engaged, and that everybody committed and did the homework. And if you did the homework, you really had an experience, and being able to chat about it the next week and feel safe. The environment felt very safe. Dan made it safe, and people grew. I witnessed it in my own personal growth. So Dan didn't pay me to say this. This is genuinely heartfelt from me. I I was thrilled that I had the opportunity, that I've been coached by Dan for these years in my own business, for me to gain my power and to have my power. I've been employing what I recently learned from Dan. I'll give you a quick example, then I'll shut up. Dan said, well, why aren't you taking the deposit from people? What was your fear? So my business is one where I've been letting, I get paid. I've been always get paid, and I let it happen at the end. And Dan said, what's the matter with you? Why don't you take some cash flow and get it up front and help your business and so forth? And it was like, duh. But why wasn't I doing it? It was me who was blocking it. I had these fears that I made up. So Dan's laser specific questions, going to the heart of it, what Dan said about him being in kind of flow, my experience with Dan is that he didn't even have to think about the answer with me. He had the answer, it was spot on, and I just had to be receptive and open enough to do it. And after that session, I processed and talked to my wife and whatever. And then during that next week, I deployed and employed what Dan said. And guess what? No one bitched about the 50% deposit. I got the deposit. So for what it's worth, for me, knowing Dan as I have and seeing his own personal positive growth and how it just inspires me, and believe what he says. I'm fortunate to be in his orbit, and I invite you guys, if he's inviting you, to take advantage of it and get into it. So Dan, you can send me a check later.
Wait a minute, if you're getting 50%, I was supposed to get 25, but anyway.
Well, yeah, we'll work it out together. We always do.
Exactly.
So I want to bring this to a close. First of all, I want to say, Dan, thank you for an illuminating and inspiring perspective on leadership and what you've seen that makes the difference. I think so much of this, is brilliant common sense, which we all know is very, very uncommon.
Yeah, short supply.
So first of all, please join me in thanking Dan. This was a great session, and
Here.
Dan's contact information a few times in there. Please reach out to him. I know Dan is an incredibly generous and brilliant guy. So take advantage of, the opportunity to reach out to him. We're going to continue this in terms of the Leadership Effectiveness Council. Our next meeting, March 4th, is actually with another one of my brilliant friends and colleague, Steve Shapiro. So I invite you to come back for that. And then again, as we go forward, these once a month programs, as we go forward, the first Thursday is going to be an open program. And after that, we're going to be inviting folks like Dan and like Steve Shapiro, like Bob Pizzini, to come in here as only for members. So when you're ready, feel free, we can reach out to me and we can talk about membership. Ashley is always available for that. It's always on the website. Come join the Leadership Effectiveness Council. And I promise you, this is the kind of session and meeting and close-in perspective you're going to get from some of the most brilliant people in leadership today. Dan, again, thank you to everybody. Thank you for being here. I know it must be valuable. This is the most valuable thing you have, is your time and attention. And
Thanks for having me, Steve. This has just been awesome and helped me to clarify a lot of things. And I hope it's been valuable for everybody, but thanks for having me.
Well, I think a lot of golden nuggets and diamonds were sprinkled throughout this hour and a half. So thank you, everybody. It's great to see you. I look forward to seeing you again on the 4th. Please feel free to reach out to talk about membership and Leadership Effectiveness Council.
Thanks,
Have a
Steve.
great rest of the day, everybody.
Hey, great. Bye-bye.